Let me ask you first where you think Germany's falling short, because it looks like when you compare this package to that of other nations that it's really rather quite green.
It is green in some sense, in the sense that there are a lot of stimulus packages or components for specific industries and sectors. But what's really missing is a consistent alignment of all the measures with respect to the climate goals. So it focuses on specific technologies, but does not account for emissions, etc., climate impacts of a broad spectrum of technologies and sectors.
Okay, good morning to you, Karen. So with that in mind, what changes would you like to see made? Is it possible to make changes at this possibly late stage that would make it easily greener?
I mean, there could be a number of changes be made. I mean, on the one hand, could be some very simple climate check on different investments that are supported. Also in the more broader scale of R&D and innovation, there could be changes made. But also there's a couple of things that are not really short term in the program already, like the hydrogen strategy, etc. So they could enhance that by also improving the framework really for decarbonization relating to carbon prices mainly, but also other issues.
Talk to us about the future of hydrogen and the German decision now on how to produce it. This hasn't really been decided. This is still an open issue, isn't it?
I mean, the hydrogen strategy, which also came out about a week after the recovery program, it states that in the long run, that hydrogen should be produced from renewable energy, so green hydrogen, and only in the medium term, also blue hydrogen would be okay. So that would be produced from fossils, but combined with CCS, so carbon capture and storage, so that that's the plan, emissions get into the atmosphere. And I think that's the right way to go. I mean, in the kind of short term, you use technologies that are already at scale available. And in the long term, you actually go for the way to actually decarbonize your economy completely in the long run.
What about, the big issue, the big sort of public issue, Karen, is whether or not to limit speeds on the Autobahn. One thing that people don't seem to be talking about very much is how to limit, or I guess they have been in recent weeks because of the coronavirus concerns in the meatpacking industry, but how to limit meat consumption. Do the measures do anything to answer either of those questions?
With respect to speed limits on the Autobahn, there's nothing in there. But from my perspective, that's not one of the most important issues we should tackle, because that doesn't really contribute a lot to the reduction of emissions. With respect to meat and agriculture, there's not that, I don't think there's anything in there actually. But of course, it's also an enhancement of the Climate Protection Act program for 2030 that came out in December last year. And there are a number of measures with respect to agriculture in there. But meat is always, or like feeding habits, is a very difficult topic to tackle. We had a debate about like a mandatory veggie day in cafeterias a couple of years back, and it created a lot of controversy. So that's probably one of the reasons why they are perhaps falling a little short in that respect.
On a broader level, Karen, if you look at the requirements within the EU for green infrastructure spending to meet the goals that have been set out by the EU, how does the German package help Germany reach those goals?
I mean, for many of the measures that are outlined in the package, there's no concrete numbers for infrastructure. There are plans to enhance infrastructure spending on, for example, e-mobility, on grid, etc. But it's usually in a package deal where a couple of measures are implemented. So it's hard to say which exact amounts are going to be spent on that.
Let me just finally ask you, you recently wrote a paper, the Flex Cap, an innovative CO2 pricing model for Germany. the carbon pricing issue, I mean, the package we had before the coronavirus crisis hit was widely derided as ridiculously low. And now it seems it'll be even more difficult to lift that cap due to struggles of companies, major employers like Lufthansa. What do you think Germany needs to do about CO2 pricing?
I mean, with respect to air traffic, it's not really in German hands, at least large part of it, because it's covered by the EU ETS, by the emission trading system of the EU. So that's EU regulation. The division was mainly with respect to the German climate tax, you really have to say, although it's supposedly a fixed price emission trading, which is basically a tax. So the price was set there after renegotiations at 25, starting with 25 euros per ton of carbon. That's about what you have in the EU emission trading system. It is too low to encourage many things with respect to changing to green technologies, and it should be raised. And I'm not quite sure whether it would be so problematic to actually raise it now, because what we see is that fossil fuel prices have gone down a lot. And so basically there would be an offset between carbon pricing and fossil fuel prices. So in the short run, it wouldn't make much of a difference with respect to increase in prices. And it would give households and firms alike the opportunity to kind of get used and to calculate with those higher prices. And I think it's a big opportunity that so far has been missed in the recovery program to actually give more stimulus through this measure than we had before.